Now, we're going to start looking at the idea of footwork for toreandos. If we have a training partner down in a supine position, let's understand that the whole idea of toreandos is to take advantage of a fundamental and very obvious fact. When my opponent is down on his back, he has very limited mobility. I, on the other hand, in standing position, have pretty good mobility. So almost everything we do in toreando type situations is based around that fundamental discrepancy. He has limited mobility, I have good mobility, so I should be able to move side to side on my opponent and take advantage of that mobility. Now, my point of contention is you will never truly take advantage of your greater mobility potential in this position without good footwork. There are some simple patterns of footwork which, if you learn them and practice them, will make a radical improvement to your toreando passing. Okay, let's have a look at some of these right now. We're going to start off with the idea of a crescent step, and this is one of the most important forms of footwork pattern. Now, a crescent step involves a step where I take my foot and my right foot comes towards my left, and then we form the shape of a crescent, stepping around with our foot pointing towards our training partner's hip line. Okay, so we go foot to foot, and then we go in a crescent shape and step around. So this gives us a great ability to do two things at once, to make forward movement and angular movement. So if I'm in front of a training partner, just have your hands above your head for now so you don't collide foot and elbow. I'm just going to take my foot and I just step around the corner and plant it like so. You swivel around so people can see on the camera. I stand in front of my training partner, and then I take the crescent step where I go foot to foot and then around the corner and my foot points. This means when I take a second step, I now find myself in a very advantageous position from which to pass my training partner's guard. This enables us to get to our preferred position, the J point, on our training partner all the way up by the hip line. It takes me from a situation where I'm in front of an opponent to one where in one motion my weight and head go over the opposite foot. That makes my right foot very, very light, and as a result you can take a very fast step around the corner and gain forward movement and angle at the same time. Common mistakes: guys have their weight equally distributed. They try to make the step and they don't go around the corner. They end up hitting their opponent. I need my head to move over the opposite leg. That makes this leg weightless, so you make the step very, very easily around the corner. So this is our first step, the crescent step. Now, the next big step we're going to learn, it's a very simple one, is a side step. If I start right on my training partner's center line, it can be hard to get advantageous angle. So the idea behind a side step is I step out to a given side to gain advantageous angle before I advance. Side steps are almost always used in conjunction with some other form of step, because the act of stepping just to the side doesn't give me advantageous positions. It gives me advantageous angle, but not position. It's only when a side step is unified with another step, say for example a crescent step, that you get advantage. Here, I'm right on Placido's center line. It can be tough sometimes to step around his legs when he starts reaching with the legs. Sometimes now, if he starts to reach and I go crescent stepping, I can end up getting caught up in his legs. Okay, so it's usually combined with a side step. Off the side step, I get the angle I need to beat the outside of his foot and get to a position where the crescent step becomes more effective. Okay, so that's our second step, the side step. Now, the next form of step that we often make use of is a cross step. The idea behind a cross step is that if my opponent is on two hips, it can be very easy for us to step around like so. It becomes more difficult when Placido falls over to a side and comes onto one hip. Now it becomes significantly more difficult for me to step around and get to the J point. You see what happens to Placido's leg when I make that step? It starts following me when I make the side step. Very often, people will make this move and there will be exposure between elbow and knee. As he goes to reach for me, this area here, the J point, will become exposed as the knee comes forward. The cross step is designed to take advantage of this. I go side step, and from here, he starts the action of reaching. Why would he do that? To form connections to me. Reverse de la Hiva, etc. Okay? If I ever see space develop here the cross step becomes an excellent footwork pattern option. So we start flat. From here, I hit a side step, draw him out. I notice he's in the act of reaching. So all I'm going to do is take this foot and step right over. Then we're in good position to go on the attack. Do not attempt this move if your opponent is on 2 hips, flat on his back, and the knees are close to the chest. This is obviously going to be a disaster, as you end up getting caught in all kinds of craziness from here. Okay? So we need to do 2 things for a cross step to happen. We need him on a hip. It might be because I sidestepped and he followed. It might be because I moved him over to the side. I moved him over to the side, like so. And most importantly, his elbow and knee disconnect, usually because he's trying to reach for you. And in those circumstances, it's very easy to step into the space available. Now we come around and we've got the advantage that we're looking for. Sometimes it'll happen when you play with your opponent's feet. As I move away, he follows, bad mistake, and you step over. Okay? But usually it's because your opponent comes to one side. As we move out to the side like so, we just get an opportunity to step over a leg and go to work. Okay? This is the cross step, another useful footwork pattern in toreando situations. Now, the next footwork pattern we make use of is a front step. If an opponent has his knees up in these circumstances, a front step involves situations where I step in front of my training partner's hip, like so. This forms a wedging action. It can be a risky gambit. If I don't control my opponent's second leg, he can scoop inside and start coming up into situations that are problematic. So it's very important that once we make this step, we follow with the second leg. Okay? There are a bunch of ways we can do this that we'll be looking at later in this video. Now, how do we use front steps? Most of the time, as we go to advance, there will be situations where your leg gets caught between your training partner's legs, like so. Okay? From here, this is a good opportunity for us to step around the corner on our training partner. Now from here, it's an easy thing for us to pull the second leg free, and as a result, we're out and able to switch our legs. So, once again, it's exploiting that critical space around the J point. Very often, that space is filled, but as opponents go to reach for you, it will temporarily become available. And those are exactly the circumstances where I can maneuver around my training partner's legs, and then from here, step out and find advantage. So one more time, we're here in front of a training partner. For whatever reason, as we move around each other, I see an opportunity to step into that space. There's the block. Now from here, second leg can come out, and as a result, we're ready to play. So a front step is another useful part of our toreando footwork series. Now, another very useful form of footwork is a back step. This can be used in different ways. The 2 most common are leg lock entries, where we step in on a training partner, and from here we're able to back step over our training partner's legs, and as a result we can sit down into various forms of leg lock as we're passing guard in ways that we'll be looking at later on in the video. So this involves an initial step inside, and then from here a step backwards that creates a situation where as we go to fall, we find ourselves in a perfect attacking position, ready to play. Now, in terms of guard passing, very often from here, we'll combine front step around the corner, and then from here we step down to the mat, and then a simple back step out. Okay, and end up with a nice guard passing situation. So once again, we start off in front of a training partner. We go into the front step that we talked about earlier. From that front step, we put our hand down on the mat, and from situations like this, we can back step out and down onto the floor like so. So backstepping has 2 important manifestations. One is an entry into leg locking, and the other as a method of completing a guard pass after a front step. Now, the next step we'll look at is a jab step. This is based on the insight that good opponents will always have their elbows and knees connected, everything in close. But at some point, Placido has to connect to me if he's going to attack me. The position he's in now is very good defensively, but offensively, there's not a lot going on because there's no connection to me. In order to attack me, he has to form some form of connection. Okay, so a jab step is designed to create the possibility of connection. Right now I'm just too far away. He can't connect to me. But if I jab step in, now there's an opportunity for him to begin the process of connection, where he'll take legs and thread them in, take hands, thread them in, and that's kind of what he wants. Okay, he might go for inside control, some kind of ashigarami. He might go for outside control, some form of dalahiva or what have you. So we use a jab step to play distance, and then from here I just put my foot in and then pull it out. So it's like a step and step. And what happens is your training partner's leg lengthens, and off that we use that to go in and attack with other forms of footwork. So a jab step is designed to make him take a risk of losing his strong defensive elbow-knee connection and look for connection. So I give him the bait and then I step out. And as a result, we can go in and start passing. So a jab step, I make all of my weight on my rear leg and I just put this out like a fishing lure, okay? And as I see him lengthening, that's what we're looking for. And we go for our throw by and start going up to the J point. So we're in front of a training partner. From here, there's nothing to play with. There's nothing at this range. And then I give him something to work with. And then from here, we go straight on past. So that's the idea of a jab step. Now, let's look at another form of attack. This is the fake step. When I'm directly in front of my training partner and his feet are pointing directly at me, I don't really have any kind of intrinsic advantage. What I want to do is to get Placido's body pointing in a given direction with his feet and knees. And then I want to pass in the opposite direction. So the idea behind a fake step is I make a kind of like a half crescent step, where I just take my foot and place it out like so. So of course it reacts. If my opponent's an idiot and doesn't react, and I step to here, it's a pretty easy thing now is to go further and go in a crescent step, okay? So I start the action of moving out and getting his body moving. And he follows my lead foot, thinking that something is coming up. What this is doing is it's putting Placido onto one hip, and it's making his knees point out to his right-hand side. Again, if he doesn't follow me, I just take a second step. So we get him moving like so. When you first start doing it, you're probably going to plant your foot. But as you get better, just your toes will touch the mat. And sometimes, if you've got a very reactive, quick opponent, your foot won't even touch. As he follows, we crescent step the other side and pass. So I get his knees moving one way. And then I step out to the other side. So that's a simple fake step. Now, the key for you, of course, is going to be integrating these various footwork patterns. No one footwork pattern is going to get you past a talented opponent, but rather it's going to be the accumulation and integration of all of them together over a period of time, which will make you effective. Particularly when you look at it in conjunction with the grips that we're going to be showing you in the next section. But as far as footwork goes, we're always looking from a situation where I can touch my training partner's feet to start incorporating all of these footwork patterns that we see. And as a result, we can come around the corner on a training partner. Every time I see any kind of step possibility, you're going to get opportunities to work both sides. I always want an opponent going from one side across to the other. When I see opportunities, learn to take them. Now, it's time for us to start getting into actual Toreando passing. And one of the big themes that I want to push on you is this idea that when you first go to approach your opponent, it is critical that you read your opponent's body so that you understand what is the problem you're trying to overcome, and then you can formulate a plan how you can overcome it. Too often I see talented young athletes just rush right in to pass and quickly get caught up in some kind of entanglement and often get beaten on the legs. So let's start off with, what should I be looking at in my opponent? What signs does he give me that guide my behavior as to how I should be looking to pass? Okay, super. Yeah. If Placido is underneath us, the first thing I want to read in my opponent is an extrapolation of the ankle and knee rule. Where is my opponent's ankle in relation to his own knee? If his ankle is lower than his own knee, then I will use grips from above to push down. You have the choice between posting on the knee or posting down by the ankle, somewhere in between. So that's our first read. Where is the ankle in relation to the knee? If the ankle is lower than the knee, we grip the top of the shin, anywhere from knee all the way down to the ankle. If, on the other hand, I see my opponent's ankle is higher than the knee, then we will grip underneath our training partner's leg, usually with some form of V grip, and control like so. Okay, so that's always our first read. When I come in towards my training partner, as I approach, my first read as I come in towards him is where are his feet in relation to his knees. If I see that they're below, we immediately come in and make contact. If I see that they're higher, we immediately come in on our training partner and we make contact like so. Okay. The second big read, which we're looking for in our opponent, is what is the relationship between his knee and his hips. In particular, the line of his hips, or hip line. If the knees are above the hip line, that makes him defensively very sound, but it means he can't connect to me. So that's the weakness. The strength is that he's formed a good elbow-knee connection, which is going to make pinning him, once I get past his legs, quite difficult. So the second big thing that I'm looking at here is what is the relationship between knees and hip line. If the knees extend out past the hip line, that's good for connection. It makes him dangerous to me. He can connect to my body. Then he can go into his attacks. However, it creates a lot of exposure of my opponent's hip line. And if I could step to that, I'm going to get in front of my training partner's knees and I can start passing his guard. So when I first come up towards an opponent, as I go to make my approach, as I come in towards him, I take my stance, I come in behind my hands, and I stop. I stop at a distance where my opponent would have to reach with a leg in order to touch me. And by reaching, he makes himself vulnerable. So an intelligent opponent is not going to reach. He's going to stay in a defensively sound position. As I stop on that barrier, a distance whereby my opponent would have to reach and bring his knee past his hip line to touch me, that's where I start reading. And I'm looking, where are his feet in relation to the knees, and where is his knees in relation to his hip line? Those are the first two things I look for. If the ankles are lower than the knees, I come in behind my hands and capture them from the top. If they're higher, then from here, we go in and capture them from the bottom. If I see my opponent's knees are all the way up by the chest, then from here I can come in and start asserting control from a fairly close distance, not having to worry about connection. If, on the other hand, I see the knees are starting to come out beyond the line of the hips, then this is going to create situations we'll be looking at shortly, where there's extension, but there is the danger that he might connect to us, and then once he gets connection, he can start attacking me. Okay? So, those are the things that we're looking for when we first go to approach our opponent. How we use them, we'll be describing very shortly. But again, just to quickly summarize for you, I don't just come in on an opponent and then he starts going in and going on the attack. Okay, I come in fairly cautiously and I stop at a distance where he would have to reach in such a manner that his knee came well beyond his hip line. That's a risk for him to do that. Okay, there's a lot of exposure now of his hip. It'd be very easy for me to go into passing sequences. So I stop at a distance where it would be risky for him to reach out and touch. From here, I read, and the big read I'm looking for, where are the feet in relation to the knees? If they're lower than the knees, we control from the top. If they're higher than the knees, we control from the bottom. If, on the other hand, I need more information, I'll look at the relationship between his knees and his hip line. If his knees are behind the hip line, that tells me he's defensively sound. However, he's offensively weak. And so I can start taking liberties now in terms of coming in, forming connection, and looking for my angles. If, on the other hand, I see the guy's reaching, well, he could form connection, but he's doing so at the price of exposure of the hip line. And as a result, we can create situations where I can go into step on him and threaten guard passes. So those are the first two things I look for in my opponent. What I see when I read will determine much of my behavior that we'll be looking at in the coming sections. Now, we're looking at this idea of those critical first moments where you first enter into a toreando guard pass. What I want you guys to do is develop the skill of developing a strong start. Okay, you get off to a good start with Toreandos, it's much easier to control the dynamic until you finally pass your opponent's guard. We've seen one of the first skills we have to develop is reading your opponent. Okay, the next big skill you have to develop is building grip asymmetry. What the hell does that mean? It means I have a grip on him, but he doesn't have a grip on me. Let's have a look at this. Okay, what I'm looking to avoid is situations where he entangles my legs. Okay, just works from situations de la Hiva, reverse de la Hiva, ashigarami, any form of entanglement on my legs. Okay, all of that is going to stop me from freely moving side to side and throwing his legs by. I don't want situations where his legs are entangled or connected with mine. What I want is the freedom of movement to use the footwork patterns that we saw earlier in the video, where I can step without impediment. The second he starts locking up on, let's say ashigarami, for example, now I can't move my legs freely. I can't move side to side. I've got to address this first. Okay, and this is true for any form of leg entanglement. So what I'm looking for is a situation where his legs have no entanglement with me, but my hands have an entanglement with his legs. That's always what we're looking for. Okay, building this is the key to your success in getting a strong start in Toreando passing. What I'm looking to avoid is situations where he's got some form of entanglement, and now I have to he can off balance me with this. I've got to address this. Okay, and only then can I start passing. So we're looking for situations where his legs have no connection with my legs, or at least very limited form of connection. It's not going to hold me back. But I, on the other hand, control my training partner's feet in some way, shape, or form where he can't form effective connections to me. Okay. Now, interestingly, because we're working without a gi, I'm not nearly as worried about entanglements with my arms as I would be if we had a gi on. Okay, no gi entanglements with arms are not really very strong. Okay, they can be very strong with a jacket on, but not without. So this is my main source of concern. So typically the way we operate is with our legs back and our upper body forward, so that I can come in behind my hands. When you hear me coaching, you'll always hear me screaming at my students, come in behind your hands. Okay, so as I go to approach, I stop, my hands are out, and they form the first connection on my training partner. So when he goes to entangle my legs, it's difficult for him to do so. As I control the feet, that's the source of his entanglement. Understand that ultimately, every form of entanglement terminates at the feet. And when the feet get dislodged for any way, shape, or form, once that foot is dislodged, the entanglement in general is much weaker. Okay, this is true regardless of whether my opponent grits you for the inside or outside or what have you, it doesn't matter. Okay, so we're always looking to make sure that his feet have a hard time connecting to us, whether we're working underneath, whether we're working on top, whether we're working with some kind of mixed strategy. We're always looking to control his feet. So when Placido goes to entangle my feet, that's always what we're looking to avoid, and make sure that those feet never connect into our legs. Okay, so I want to come in behind my hands so that my hands make connections with his feet, but his feet never make connections with my legs, or at least limited connection. Okay, so once we come in and we start making those initial connections, it's very, very hard for an opponent now to stop us coming into positions where we have some kind of advantage over our training partner. So my general thing is, when you go to approach, come in a very specific stance. Make sure your upper body leads your lower body. Make sure you operate at a distance where it's extremely risky for him to come out and reach for you. It would be very easy indeed to break a connection under those circumstances. Come in behind your hands so that your hands are a barrier between his feet and your legs. Don't come in with the hands as no effective barrier. Okay? Have your body in a stance where your hands protect your legs. And you come in with your hands making contact first. So when he goes to connect to my legs, it's a very difficult thing. Okay? I don't want those feet connecting to me. Now, an obvious question here is, what if I get off to a bad start? What if this guy just gets a connection? Let's say ashigarami, for example. Well then, under these circumstances, you have to break whatever his entanglement is first. Okay? So in the case of ashigarami, we'll always be looking to hit a pass off so I can get my hand and thumb inside his ankle and then break the connection to my hip, just like so. Now I can't just let him reconnect, so I want to make sure I post inside my training partner's opposite leg, thumb post, and then step over. So that now 2 feet are on one side of his body. The only form of ashigarami connection he could make now would be to come around the corner into a different form of connection. And again, you would have to make sure the feet are connected, and then from here, step out using high step methods, etc. When someone comes into an ashigarami, you're always looking to high step out. You never want to give them the benefit of going through and around and forming connections. Once they do form connections, you have to break those connections and make those steps. As he comes around the corner, we're always looking to high step out and deny. And I'm sure you can all guess what's my first movement after we've broken our training partner's grip. We come right back in, behind the hands, make our read on our opponent, and then from here, create situations where we have advantage. If someone comes into Dalahiva, for example, from Dalahiva, we're always looking to take this foot, which should be locked into my hamstring, and weaken it by putting the hand here inside my training partner's knee. Second leg is blocked knee, shin, and then from here, as he makes a strong connection, look how we just place our hand inside our training partner's knee and just push down. That takes his foot out. He wants his foot locked in here. I want his foot off. As my leg straightens and I push down on the knee, he loses his connection. Okay, then it's pretty easy for us to start stripping grips, high legging out and moving away. If he goes into reverse Dalahiva, from here again, I don't want this foot connecting in. So regardless of how he's positioned, we put a hand inside our training partner's knee, and then as always, we just straighten the leg out. And as a result, we get a quick break. Once we get that break, we just hit the same high leg action and come back in behind our hands, reading our training partner and getting situations where he's no longer hooked into our legs. So again, it's always the same strategy. If we get caught up in some form of entanglement, we're going to always look to address the entanglement first. Create situations where every time he goes in to connect, we use a combination of grip breaks and high legs. Every time I see him coming in, we can use a simple high leg to move away. Then when we approach, we come in behind our hands. Okay, so that my hands are between his feet and my legs. So when he goes to entangle, it's going to be difficult. And then from here, we can start making the movements we need to get to the advantage positions we ultimately seek. So once again, once we've made a read on an opponent, when we go into approach, we want to create a grip asymmetry. That means simply my hands on his feet and legs, but his legs, no connection to my legs. Okay, that means a simple stance where my legs are back, my torso is forward. I'm not worried about upper body connections. No gi, they're not very strong. This is what I worry about. Okay, so the legs are back, torso is forward, and my hands are between his feet and my legs. I read. If the feet are high, we go under. If the feet are low, we go over. And we create situations where I have grips on him, but he does not have grips on me. As a result, we're going to go into the passes that we're going to be looking at shortly. If we get caught up in situations where we make a boo-boo and your opponent does get into entanglements, break the entanglements first, move away, and then come right back in behind your hands in good stance and create the grip asymmetry. So using whatever grip break methods you favor, usually I involve separating your opponent's legs, stepping or high stepping in the middle of this entanglement attempt, and then coming right back in behind your hands, making the connections you seek to go to work. Okay, when we go into an approach an opponent in a supine position, looking for Toreando passing, and Placido's down, we've seen the idea of reading our opponent's body, what we're looking for. Now it's time to get into the nitty gritty. How am I going to grip my opponent's legs so I can form a strong enough asymmetry that I can start the passing game going, okay? I don't want to come in with waffly grips and not knowing what is my grip good for, what is it not good for. When we work with a gi on, and we've got gi pants, you have choices which involve gripping the cloth from inside, outside, etc. They're very strong grips. When you work without a gi, The grips are much more transient. Your hand is not as strong as his leg. If he violently kicks and rips his leg, there's no way I'm going to hold it. So typically you just touch and go. The grips come and go much more quickly without the gi than they do with a gi. This must be reflected in your actions in toreando passing without the gi. Now, when I first go in, first tip is double down grips. Using my hands in the shape of a V, we come in towards an opponent, and from here I put my hands on my training partner's legs like so. I typically favor gripping down by the ankles, but it's not wrong to come up halfway down the shins, it's okay. But when you go closer to the ankles, you get a longer lever and you get a better opportunity to push his legs into a weak position of flexion that we talked about earlier in the video. Now, once we get here, the virtue of this grip is it's very good for two things. Holding an opponent stationary for a brief period of time, and it's very good for pushing from one side to the other. It's a good pushing grip and a pretty good holding grip. Those are the virtues of this grip. So when I come in on my training partner and I lock, first virtue is holding him in place, and then we move out to the side. Okay, so that's one way you could use it in a practical session. A second thing they're good for is from situations where I grab my training partner, I can physically push his legs out to the side. Okay, the heavier my opponent is, the less likely I am to use a push, and the more likely I am to use an immobilization and move myself. Okay, because I'm heavier than PASSagem, I can move his body pretty easily. But if I was fighting a much heavier opponent, I'd be looking to use him to hold and then step to the outside. Against a lighter opponent, I might use them to push my opponent out to the side like so and get to an advantage position. So this would be the use of double down V grips. This is one of the most common forms of grips. It's used whenever the feet are the same height as the knees or lower, and we're on top of our opponent and able to get to grips just like so. And as a result, we can go in and grip. Now, a second grip, very, very useful, is double sole. That's where we come in towards a training partner, and I notice that his feet are a little higher, okay? But they're not so high that I can expose my training partner's Achilles tendon. They're somewhere in between in a gray zone. If they were very low, I would go double down V. If they were very high, I would go up V. But sometimes they're in a kind of a gray zone between. That's when we use sole or double sole, okay? I come in towards my training partner, and from here, I just come in nice and close, and I just cover my training partner's foot. Then I double up on the other side. Now you have a situation, sorry, not over, where you have outside control with your fingers and inside control with your thumb. Okay? Now I know what you're thinking. Dude, there's no way I can hold someone's leg very long. Yeah, you're correct. You can't hold it for very long, but you don't have to. Okay? So when I come in on PASSagem, and from here I catch. From this position, I'm always looking to open him from the outside, and as a result, I can put a leg in and go into other grips. So, of course, you don't want to try to control the human leg, which is very strong in this direction, with your hands. All you want to do is deflect it, okay? So as I come in on the training partner, I make a quick contact, and from here I get his feet facing up to the ceiling. I do not hold here, where if he pushes me, there's no way I can hold him. I make his feet point to the ceiling, okay? So from here, I come in on a training partner and I just lift. Now when he goes to leg press me, all he does is flip himself over. He's strong with the leg press when his lower back is on the ground. Put your feet on my chest. From here, when his lower back's on the ground, he can make me go up and down all day. But when his lower back leaves the ground, now when he goes through the same, all he does is make himself go over, okay? So this is a quick grip where we get our control and we make his feet face the ceiling. So as we come in behind our hands, just like so. I make light contact, he's probably gonna be moving his feet, etc., etc. And then when we decide it's time to go, we come in and we get to our grips, okay? So this is double sole, a very useful grip, which we use in toreando passing no gi. Now, we're looking at no-gi toreando passing. One of the big themes that I'm trying to push on you guys is the idea that when we go with no-gi toreando, PASSagem down, we have to modify our thinking from the gi game. In the gi game, we're looking to control our training partner's pants, either from inside or from outside, single or double. And this gives you a very strong grip It comes at the price that your opponent can go inside your biceps. That's the downside of it. But the good side is you've got immensely strong grips, which give you tremendous rotational ability and the ability to hold the grips for fairly long periods of time. Okay, you get a hold of the pants, you can dictate the turns for 10, 20, 30 seconds sometimes. When you go no gi, that's not realistic. Okay, the good news is he can't really go into your upper body no gi, but the bad news is your grips don't last as long. Okay, and to make up for this, you have to have more variety of grips. So you can't hold the grips as long as you can, but you've got more grips to work with, and they're easier to get to. So what tends to happen is there's a much higher pace of grip fighting and a much wider range of possible grips that you employ. That's why I'm spending this time to show you all the possibilities of grip, because you're going to need to know all of them to be an effective no-gi toreando passer. Next one we use is one of my personal favorites. This is used anytime my opponent's feet are higher than the knees. So we get exposure of the Achilles tendon. Okay. In these situations we use up grips. We use a V-shaped hand pointing upwards. Previously we used V-shaped grip pointing down. Now we're going up. Maybe not that high. So as we come in on a training partner, I notice that his feet are higher than his knees. That's going to make it very difficult to use the grips that we looked previously. Okay, so instead we go underneath and we just go right here. Now, if I go here and he clamps down hard, his feet are stronger than my hands. So it's a race to get my opponent's feet facing the ceiling. Okay, so don't go like this and stop, because his legs are going to be stronger than your thumbs. Okay. Life doesn't work that way. I don't care how strong you are. Your thumbs are not as strong as his legs. Okay. So as we come in on our training partner, I come in behind my hands, and as I play, distract, boom, we go right here. We make his feet face the ceiling. What this does is it exposes two things: the inside of the knee to a block, and the lower back to a wedge. Okay, where I can get my knees, my chest, and clamp them in place. Okay, so that's always what we're looking for with this form of grip. So as we start with our training partner in front, I notice this is going to be a difficult situation to turn my opponent, because his feet are higher than the knees. If the feet are lower than the knees, then it's much easier to turn people. Okay, but when the feet are high, it's very hard to turn them now, very hard. But it's very easy to make their toes touch the floor above them and put them into weak positions where their knee is exposed, the inside of the knee, and the lower back is exposed. So as we come in on our training partner, we just go in like so. Now we're in the perfect position to get knee exposure and lower back exposure. Okay, and from there, we'll be seeing later on in the video, there's many ways for us to pass our opponent's guard. Now, let's look at another critical grip for your development in your toreando passing without the gi. Remember, the big theme that Placido and I are trying to push on you is the idea that when we work without the gi, the very nature of toreando passing changes somewhat. Instead of having a few really strong grips that can persist over time, you have to have a lot of grips which don't last very long at all, and you have to go from grip to grip to grip, and as it were, grip and attack, grip and attack, grip and attack, as opposed to grip and control and take your time. So the overall look of no-gi toreando passing is substantially different from no-gi. Now, each one of these grips has an area which it's very good at and areas which it's not good at. The grip we're about to look at now, the knee and shin post, is very good for turning people. Okay, that's its strength. It's not very good for lifting people, it's not very good for controlling them down, but it's very good for making them spin. Why is spinning so easy? It's because Placido is a good athlete with his elbows and knees joined together. If Placido's knees extend away and a big gap develops between the knees and the elbows, you're going to see that his whole back is flat on the mat. So there's a lot of friction or drag. So that when you go to turn him, you have to work against all that friction. But when he curls up and brings everything compact, now his spine is shaped like the bottom of a rocking chair or a banana. And as a result, there's very little contact with the mat. And as a result, his whole body turns very easily. Okay? This fundamental physiological fact is what's this grip is based around. As I come in towards my training partner, I see he's so well positioned with knee and elbows that it's going to be pretty hard for me to go in and start getting advantage. So instead, I'm going to grip a shin and I'm going to grip a knee. So as I start on my training partner, I just go right to my grips. There, there, here, here. And off that movement, we get quick turns that expose our training partner to a new position where we can go in and start some of the passing sequences that we're going to see later on in this video. So once again, I notice as I read my opponent's body that his knees are above his hip line. You remember what we said about reading the body earlier in the video? We're reading this man. And we see his knees are well above his hip line. That means he's defensively strong when I'm in front or on the side. So it would be in my interest to turn him to a new position where he may not be so defensively strong. So as I come in, I block one, step two, and we just spin this guy so that my arms, you look like a guy who's parking a car in the car park. You turn the wheel and your arms cross, okay? I come in, touch, and turn. And now we're in a very good position to start some of the passing sequences that we'll see later on in this video. Now, let's look at another very, very important gripping method for no-gi toreando passing. Plus, if you could just have your head facing this way so we get a 45-degree angle. Okay, once we achieve angle on an opponent, we understand from earlier in the video that we're dealing with an inside leg and an outside leg. The inside leg is always trying to connect knee and elbow to make it difficult to pass and to recover guard. And the outside leg is continually trying to come across and form connections so that PASSagem can realign himself with me. That's the basic gambit in which we're working against. Now, an inside knee post is designed to stop this kind of thing from happening. The idea is I come down and get a conventional grip here on the near shin, and my second hand posts inside the knee. So that when my opponent goes to use this leg, you're blocking from the inside, okay? It's not, as it were, the most resolute of grips. It can be broken in time, but it's very good as a quick measure to stop the outside leg from coming in and get into your position. It might look something like this. So as I play with PASSagem's near leg, we're playing descend like so. Once I get an angle on my training partner, I just post here. And when he goes to recover, it's a difficult thing. As he goes to recover, in the time available, we'll be able to come in and get into our favorite passing positions. It holds it out from the inside just long enough that he can't get what he wants. If I don't monitor that leg, that one comes over, hooks, and he realigns himself, okay? Now, guys, understand that this is the fastest moving part of the leg. So if I get a reach on his leg, it's freaking difficult to get a hold of. It's always moving. But the slowest moving part of the leg is here and here. Okay, so this one is very difficult for me to get, but this one's easy. When he goes to bring that leg back in now, we're in the perfect position to start getting our passes, okay? So typically what happens in this kind of grip fight situation is we'll come in on a training partner and we might start with a given grip, we get to an angle, and then when I make the switch, I pass that hand in and I block from the inside, okay? So I'll start with a given grip and then I'll come out here. As he goes to recover, that's when we're looking to get to our passes, okay? So a very useful temporary grip to block your opponent's outside leg from the inside and make recovery very difficult. Please understand, it's a very transitory grip. You can't realistically expect to hold this for extended periods of time. You tend to use it going from one grip to another. So I get an initial grip, move, block, and look for my passes. Now, we're looking at the array of grips that you're going to need to be a successful no-gi toreando guard passer. Now, most opponents have what we call symmetrical legs, where the two legs are down or the two legs are up, okay? But it's actually a good thing for your opponent to have asymmetrical legs. Why? Because if both legs are up, it's pretty easy to go underneath and run someone's toes to the mat. If both legs are down, it's pretty easy to control them and step to the side. So what a lot of intelligent people do is they have asymmetrical legs, which makes it harder for me to get the same control on two legs. And you end up in these awkward situations where when you go to make grips, you only really get one leg at a time, and you can't really get the control you need. In these situations, we use a specialized grip. As I come in towards my training partner, I take a down grip here. As I see the second foot is up, I'm going to come in and take an inverted grip here. My thumb goes under and it controls his leg from the inside. Okay? Don't try to do this when you're right in line with the leg. You get all the wrong angles. What I have to do is have to step off angle. So I'm out here. I'm just slightly off the center line. So if I start on the center line, I come slightly off center line. And then I catch his foot. So when Placido tries to use his outside leg, it's blocked here from the outside. Again, this is not the strongest grip, and it's not designed to hold people for extended periods of time. It's designed to shut out the outside leg long enough that I can get to another grip. Okay? So it might look something like this. I come in on an opponent, and I notice he's got his game ready, and he's got asymmetrical feet. So from here I come in, I take the first foot, I go offline, and I catch. Now as I maneuver around my training partner, he tries to bring the leg back in. It's tough because I'm blocking it from the outside. And then from here I'll switch to another form of grip and go in and actually pass. So it's not a passing grip, it's a holding grip, which leads to other grips which you actually pass with. Okay? So let's come closer to the camera. So we're working in here, and I notice Placido has asymmetrical grips. If he doesn't have asymmetrical feet, it's just all the stuff we've been looking at so far. Okay? But this guy's smart, and he's coming out and he's playing asymmetrical. So from here I come in behind my hands, as we always do. I go offline and I catch, just like so. From the inside, my hand inverted. So when he goes to bring that leg back in, it's very difficult. And then from here, we go into our other passing grips, which we'll be looking at shortly. Now, the grip we're going to look at now, the inverted cross grip, one of the most useful in the sport, but it can only be done from one given position, okay? And that is the position we've been referring throughout this video is the J point, okay? First, what is an inverted cross? It's any situation where I have exposure of my training partner's legs, so his legs are at least 90 degrees, like so. We don't use it when the foot is down here, it's a disaster. It has to be at least 90 degrees. That's usually the case when we stand here and he goes to bring his leg over to put us back in guard. Okay, we're looking for the exposure of the hamstring and calf and the knee. That's what we're looking for. You won't get that if you're in front of people. Okay, for me to try and do this kind of disaster, it's never going to work. It only works when we come out to the side and the leg comes over, and then we come in and we grip just like so. Okay, so as he brings the leg across, that's what we're looking for. Okay, leg comes up and we brush. It's a brushing grip. As we do that brush, we just step across to the other side. And every time a leg comes across, we get that opportunity to brush a leg from the inside and bring our legs through side to side. So you always end up in situations where you're on the J point side to side. This is not a grip to use when you're in front of people. So typically what happens here is we use a given grip to move out to an angle. And as our opponent tries to put us back in guard, we practice moving side to side on it. So the eternal pattern of the inverted cross is we use a given guard passing grip to get to an angle. As he goes to recover guard, we use it to move across to the other side. Okay, so it's the inverted cross used from the J point to put side to side pressure on an opponent. There is a specialized grip which we often make use of, particularly when you've got a momentary advantage in the Toreando battle. When you feel you've got a slight angle on your opponent, you've maybe made it up to the J point, you're almost past, and you need a stronger, more solid connection to one of your opponent's legs, usually the inside leg. Most of the grips that we look at in no-gi Toreando are one-on-one grips. So I have one hand on one leg and one hand on the other, regardless of where I grip. But occasionally we make use of two-on-one grips where I ignore one leg and put all of my resources into one leg at a time. So I have 2 on 1 as opposed to 2 on 2. Okay? When would we use this? Usually when you've gotten to a slight angular advantage and your opponent is facing slightly away from you. Okay? This is the best time to use it. If he's facing towards you, you're better off focusing on pushing away on the outside leg. But every so often you're going to create situations where you get your opponent running away and he extends the leg to put you back in guard. Okay? So the ideal time to hit this is when you're at an angle and he's on the outside hip, like so. This is the best time to hit it. The worst times to hit it are when you're directly in front of people and their hips are flat on the ground. Then it's just useless. You're much better off going 2-on-2. Okay, so the typical pattern of using 2-on-1s is something like this. We come in behind our hands and I use a grip to get to an advantage and I start exposing my opponent like so. As he does so, we grip 2-on-1. One at the knee, one here. Doesn't matter how you grip, as long as you've got 2-on-1. When he goes to put me back in guard, it's very, very difficult. Even if he scooted out now, it would still be difficult. And you can start playing back between all the various grips that you saw earlier in the sequences. Okay, so once again, we have an opponent in front of us. We approach with the various possibilities, just like so. Now from here, as I see his legs coming in, that's what we're looking for, 2-on-1. And it's so hard for him now to start that action of putting us back in guard, and we use it to solidify the pass. So this can be a very useful finishing grip. Okay, it's not a good grip to start with, but it's a good grip to finish with. Now, I know what you're thinking. We've been practicing on all these grips, and I haven't even shown you how to pass someone's guard with a Toreando pass yet. Don't worry, let's start to get down now into the nitty-gritty of it. All of these methods of gripping, all of these footwork patterns, all of these methods of reading your opponent, all come down to one thing. My whole philosophy of no-gi Toreando passing is to use the multiplicity of grips, footwork patterns, reading your opponent, all the stuff we've looked at, to get to one position above all others. When we work without the gi, the lack of clothing means you have a lack of lasting control of your opponent's legs. And this tends to create situations where people just throw people's legs around. They try to use speed to pass their opponent's guard in no-gi Toreando passing. My approach is a little different. What I try to do is I use the multiplicity of grips and footwork patterns that we've looked at so far with a focus on getting to one position that actually does offer real control without clothing. This is the hip and knee post. Plus, here, come closer to the camera and 45 degrees. Okay, what is a hip and knee post? The hip and knee post addresses the fundamental reality of guard passing, which is that you go to an angle and create an inside leg and an outside leg. The inside leg is predicated on elbow-knee connection, and the outside leg is predicated on a high leg action, which enables me to him to make contact with me and realign the body. Okay, so that's the basic reality of guard retention. Everything is based around the idea of elbow-knee connection on the inside and high leg into realignment on the outside. Now, obviously, there are different ways for opponents to use the high leg. You can penetrate with the knee, you can swing the leg over, you can go inside the arm, you can go inside the legs, you can go on the far shoulder, but they're all variations on that theme. Okay? Now, when we come into this situation, what I'm looking for is to get a situation where I dominate the inside of the outside leg to prevent it being an effective mechanism of retaining guard. Okay? The best way to do this is to take inside control at the hip and include your forearm so that the whole forearm goes inside his hip socket. Now, even with my hand here, Placido can still take his leg over and make connection, good, and put me back in guard, like so. So even inside control with the arm is not enough. You have to have inside control with the head as well. So when I come in and I establish inside control, I need my head lower than his knee. If my head is higher than the knee, he can always bring his foot inside. So my whole thing is to get my head lower than his knee. Now when he tries to bring the outside leg over,
that's hard.
He can never do it. He can't even bring the knee inside my arm. Can't even do that. Okay, so this is the inside control I seek. Hand, forearm, elbow, head. My head is inside the knee. My forearm is inside the hip. Go to put me back in guard.
It's challenging.
All he can do is connect his knee and elbow and stop me. So what I do is I put my hand here on his knee. Do you guys remember the theory of the crocodile jaws? The leg is very weak at going knee to chest. So what I do is I start an action of running in this direction to take his elbow and knee apart. I just place my knee close to his tailbone. When he goes to put me back in guard, you get the connection you need to block him out and pass. The hip and knee post is by far the most powerful method of retaining significant control over your opponent's hips and legs without clothing. My whole philosophy of toreando passing without the gi is just to use that multiplicity of grips, footwork patterns, readings, etc., to get to this position. All I do is play patty cake with his ankles and knees, spin, turn, and then get that position. That's it. Because I know once I get this position, and my hand is inside, and my wrist dominates, and my head is inside his knee, and my hand is here in front of his knee, I take advantage of the principle of the asymmetry between the pushing strength and the pulling strength of the knee, and the idea of inside position to shut out his outside leg. And when he goes to put me back in guard, I can stay here for extended periods of time until I separate the elbow and the knee and I get my pass. What I want you guys to do is to just think in terms of using all those grips and footwork patterns that I gave you to just create movement and opportunity until the far hip is exposed and you go in. Okay? Everything we do is that simple idea. Just come further away. So, when I first come in on an opponent, working from guard, I play with various grips. I play with distance. And then when I see an opportunity, that's what I'm looking for. I just get that position, the hip and knee post. Why? Because the hip and knee post is the only no-gi grip which mechanically controls your opponent's outside leg from the inside and reliably breaks the elbow and knee connection on the inside. It's the only grip that, because of your head position, you can hold for relatively long periods of time without a gi. It's the only grip which simultaneously shuts out the outside leg and breaks apart the inside leg and the knee. Once again, all I do is play patty cake with all those grips that we saw earlier. Until we get the hip and knee post. Let's have a look at the mechanics of it again. Yeah. I want to position myself hand, wrist deep. Don't go on the stomach. Wrist deep so that your whole forearm and elbow is inside the knee. Don't be satisfied. Put your head below his knee. Put your hand in front of his knee. Make sure your hips are higher than your head. Don't have your legs in so close that he can entangle you. You want your legs out and away. And then from here, you can start that action of running the circle that puts you in the perfect passing position. We'll look at how to solidify the pass soon. And that is the general pattern of no-gi toreando passing squad style. We use movement, grip exchange, body positioning, reading your opponents intelligently until we see an opportunity in the hurly-burly of grip fighting to see a hip and knee post, boom, and take it. And that's where we do our passing from, no-gi toreando style. Now, we just looked at the king of all no-gi toreando passing positions. This is the idea of the hip and knee post. We're always looking to create grip fighting exchanges, go through a multiplicity of grips, and then get to our favorite passing position from where you can control opponents reliably, even without the gi. Second big position that we make use of is toes to mat, or plow position in yoga. As we start in front of a training partner, we notice that the feet are higher than the knees. That's going to make it harder for us to get angles on opponents and harder for us to beat this leg to get the inside knee post. Because his knees are so close to the chest, it's now harder to get the inside position with the hand. However, this blocking of the hip and knee post has come at the price of Achilles exposure. And that means we can go through on a training partner, and as we start with our hands in front, always moving in behind our hands, we just catch our training partner, make his feet point to the ceiling. From here, I just take a step and then a second step, and I just take my training partner's toes down to the mat, and I replace it right there with my knee. As a result, we're in a position to pinch our knees around our training partner. We get back exposure on the part of our training partner, and we create situations where any attempt on his part to bring us back will expose our training partner's far hip and create situations where we're in a great position to pass our training partner's guard and methods that we'll look at later on in the video. So even when it fails, still very good, okay? So as we start off in front of a training partner, we notice that there's exposure of the Achilles. There's knees to chest, which makes hip and knee post very difficult, but makes plow, or toes to mat, very easy. So as we come in, we just run our training partner's toes to the mat, and then from here, we've got back exposure on the far side. We've got torso exposure if he kicks back into us. We've also got the possibility from here of coming around the corner and going into north-south passes that we'll be looking at later on in the video. So this too gives us tremendous physical control over an opponent, no gi, and enables you to get the control for extended periods of time that you need to get strong passes on tough opponents. One more time from another angle. We have an opponent who's done a good job of bringing knees to chest, and as a result, it's really hard to get the inside control that we seek. But this comes at the price of the exposure of our opponent's Achilles tendons. So as we start off here in front of a training partner, we see that exposure and run the toes to the mat. Immediately, we block them in place with the knee. We use our second knee, knees pinching, to expose our training partner's back. You can pass in that direction, okay? We can come around the corner and pass north-south. If he's so strong that he pushes off the mat, I just take inside position with my elbow, and now we're in perfect position to pass our training partner's guard in ways we'll look at later on in the video. So this is our second favorite method of working from toreandos. Same philosophy. Use a multiplicity of grips and movement until we expose the Achilles tendon, and then just run the toes to the mat. Once the toes touch the mat, it's actually really hard for your opponent to bring everything back. And you're in a position now with back exposure, chest exposure, and north-south exposure, which you can exploit for various guard passes, which we'll look at later on in the video. Now, it's time to start getting into actual guard passes. We looked at a lot of theory. Now it's time to get down into practice. So let's look at the first toreando guard pass, no gi, that I always teach. This is the throw by. Let's come a little closer to the camera. So you've got an opponent in a supine position. First thing we do is we read our opponent, and we understand that one of the most important things we read is the relationship between his knee and his hip line. The further the knees are behind the hip line, the more defensively sound he is, but the less connection he has to us, the more our opponent reaches for us, the more apt he is to gain connection, but the more vulnerable he is because the leg has become extended, so it's weaker, it's slower to move, and there's more exposure of our opponent's hip line, okay? So as they say in life in general, everything comes at a price. Throw-bys are based on the idea that if my opponent's knees ever start coming out beyond the hip line, that extension means that my opponent's legs become weaker and therefore more liable to be thrown by. What is a throw by? That's where we gain control of our training partner's ankles and we use momentum to physically throw them. You lose contact with the legs. So we're not doing this. We're not maneuvering the legs and still controlling them. You still have contact. The idea behind a throw by is that we create a little momentum and we physically throw them by. So momentum is the key to the pass. This creates a time gap where your opponent takes time to recover from the throw. And in that time, you go into your passing maneuvers, okay? So it would be useless to perform throw-bys when their knees are up by the chest. The legs are just too strong. You can't throw them anywhere, okay? Understand that throw bys only become effective when the knees go past the hip line, especially when they go by in unison. Say, for example, your opponent posts on your hips here, like so. This is the perfect time to start hitting throw bys. Okay, so he doesn't want you covering distance, he wants you coming in. This is the perfect time to hit a simple throw by and use momentum to go past your opponent. Okay, now the first time you see this, you think to yourself, man, that's too good to be true, it's too easy. Well, it still works at world championship level. Okay, even the basic one that I'm showing you now. So the first idea is to identify opportunity. If the knees are by the chest, this is not the time to throw bys. There's better things you can do. Okay, but when the knees start coming beyond the hip line, this is the perfect time to hit it. From here, we gain control of our training partner's heels, and typically what we do is we create a step in a given direction and a movement. So what do you think your opponent's going to do? If he doesn't react when I create the step, it's very easy to throw the legs by. It's hard to throw by stationary and square. Okay? From a square stance, you have very little ability to throw. What you want to do is create a step that builds momentum in a given direction, and it's that which throws them by. Now, will that opportunity last forever? Absolutely not. Okay, look how quickly PASSagem can recover from a throw by. Once I throw the legs by, it comes back pretty quick, right? So you don't have to be the fastest guy in the gym, but you can't procrastinate either. Once we get a hold of our training partner's legs in this position and we decide we're going to hit that throw by, we want to make the crescent step and get our knee in front of his knee. His goal is to bring his knee in front of yours, and your goal is to keep your knee in front of his. Okay? So once again, we're in front of our training partner as we come out and play in this position. We see various opportunities to go in for our grips, movement, and there's the step. My knee is in front of his. When he tries to bring the legs back in, this is exactly the time we'd use those other grips that we talked about earlier in the video, 2-on-1s, post, etc., etc. So as we start off in front of a training partner, I read my opponent, and I notice he's playing with his knees beyond his hip line. If he started going knees to chest, I would use another form of guard pass. Okay? So what we do is we hang out, knees to chest. We hang out at a distance where he can't do anything. So he's saying to himself, how am I going to use my guard? He's got to start reaching, right? He's got to start backing away a little bit. So he starts getting a little bit more bold. He starts coming towards us. Maybe not quite like that. He starts bringing his feet towards us. My God, Fluffy, you've lost your mind. From here, we work in this position. I play at a distance, and I see him reaching, and I'm reading him the whole time. And I see his knees are coming in beyond the hip line. And that's what we're looking for. There's the throw by, and there's the step, my knees in front. If I see him bringing legs back in, this is a good time for us to use those 2-on-1 grips that we talked about earlier. Okay, so this is the first throw by you must learn, and the basic idea behind it is opportunity. This is not the time for it. Play a distance game. Play at a distance where he has to reach and play. Don't make it obvious what you want. Have a sense of subtlety here. Play some time, fake a pass. He comes back, so now he's thinking, oh, yeah, I can handle this, it's not so bad. And that's when you hit the throw by and go. Okay? Now we're looking at throw by Toreando passes. One of my all-time favorites is a misdirectional throw by. As you get to higher and higher levels, you're going to find that one-sided or simple throw bys, they can definitely work, especially if your opponent's in a vulnerable position. But what typically happens is your opponent sees the step and feels the throw by, and they start shifting their weight onto their hips and turning, and as a result, the throw by won't work. Remember, throw bys work best when your opponent's two hips are flat on the mat. That's the best time to throw legs by. The worst time to throw legs by is when he's on one hip, like so. It's very hard to throw against his hips. Okay, the movement is much less. So typically what happens is we start with a given throw by and he turns his hips. Okay, so what we want to get used to is the idea of a misdirectional throw by where I hold underneath the Achilles tendons. By the way, the grip for a throw by, I should have said this earlier, a grip for a throw by is always underneath, just like so. Okay, when we looked at grips earlier, we were looking at grips when the legs are close to the body in a good defensive position. Throw-bys are done when the legs are extended out a little further away, and this is the best place to grip. You step, and off the step you create momentum, and he counteracts the momentum. I'm trying to throw Placido to his right-hand side. So of course he starts counterbalancing to stop it from happening. Okay, so he thinks I'm going to throw to his right, and he starts, yeah, you can see what he's doing with his hips. That's what I'm looking for. So at the higher levels, we have to get used to this idea that as he goes to move, now we throw back in the opposite direction. This is an even better way of employing throw-bys because it uses the momentum of his body to amplify its effects. So as we start off with a training partner in front of us, and we see that opportunity, we just throw him by and crescent step into good position. You get a much stronger effect because of the misdirectional element. Here's a basic throw by with no resistance. We just throw him by. So maybe we've hit that successfully a couple of times. Now the guy's wising up. As we play from this position, now I fake one and take him two, and we're in perfect position to go. My knee in front of his knee, stepped up to our training partner's J point, and we're ready to play. So this is a misdirectional throw by. Now, one of my favorite uses of throw-bys is to create an opening to get to our all-time favorite Toreando passing method, the hip and knee post. So if we have a training partner in front of us, sometimes it can be difficult just to get an angle on people and get to a hip and knee post. Okay? But you'll be pleasantly surprised that throw-bys are an excellent way to get that initial angle. So even if you don't get the guard pass, you do get an angle. And if you get that angle, you can go into our all-time favorite method of passing, the hip and knee. So as we start in front of a training partner and we're playing in front of this man, we're going to get opportunities to have a quick throw by. And that creates just enough space as he goes in to recover for us to get to our favorite position. Now as he puts frames up on my shoulders from here, we're in the perfect position to lock out elbow and knee. As he goes to push me back, look how from here I just push on his knee and I run the circle. And as a result, we're in the perfect position now to get into to pass our opponent. So we go with a two-stage method. Everything begins with a throw-by to get angle, and then we finish with the hip and knee post, because the hip and knee post is an intrinsically stronger, more controlling position. So a throw-by relies on speed, a hip and knee post doesn't. So from here, I can't get to hip and knee because he's doing a good job with his feet, making things difficult for me. Okay? And at some point, we see an opportunity to hit that misdirectional as he goes into a cup. That's what we're looking for. Now as he goes to hold us off, we're in the perfect position to run through and get to our pass. This is probably one of the most high percentage ways of using throw-by passes. So from another angle, we've got a talented opponent in front of us. As we come in on our training partner, we see various opportunities to go to work. From here, I come up, we throw them straight on blank, and we go in and get to our hip and knee post and pass. So it's that two-stage philosophy of Toreando passing, which I'm trying to advocate in this video, of using a given method of creating angle and then going to the strongest, the king of no-gi Toreando positions, hip and knee, and then finishing from hip and knee. Now, it's very important we start using throw-by Toreando passes in conjunction with other methods of passing. That's because the throw-by doesn't intrinsically control your opponent. It's a move based around moving your opponent and moving with speed into the gap that you've created. As you deal with opponents who are either anticipating you, because you've done it to them before and the surprise value is lost, or because they're very just well positioned with their elbows and knees together, it's harder and harder to use throw-bys. So we have to be able to use it in tandem with other methods of passing. We've just seen the hip and knee post, which I'm trying to portray as the single best method. But there's another great method too, that's toes to floor. We take our training partner and touch his toes to the mat. This might look something like this. We come in on a skillful opponent and we see the opportunities there to hit a throw-by. When I go to hit the throw-by, very often they will bring their leg high, come in, track, and put us back in guard. That high leg is what I'm looking for, because as the high leg comes in, it's going to expose the Achilles tendon. Okay, so as we come in on our training partner, we start off various grips, playing, looking in like so, we're having a hard time, and then we quickly hit that throw by. As he comes in, I catch it. Now, I touch his toes down towards the mat, and I always want to post the other leg and run around the corner until we get an opportunity to place our knee right in the pocket of our training partner's knee, like so. Now there's a bunch of ways you can go here in terms of attacking your opponent's back, attacking the chest, but the one we're going to look at is a north-south attack, where I take my hand and lock it just in like so. As I walk around, my head goes to the opposite side, and from this position, I'm going to bring my feet into a position where my foot crosses over my training partner's ankle. As we pommel, watch how my right ankle is replaced by the left, just like so. Now from here I come in, I take my second hand and punch it inside my training partner's hip. As he frames and pushes and does all those things that people do, we just lock and capture both of our training partner's hips. Now when he tries to bring his knees in, my head functions as a post, clear away the legs, and we get a nice pass. So once again, sorry if I said it.
No, it's good. I wanted you to pass at that point.
All right, I'm getting old and fat. So as we work in front of our training partner, we go through and we hit. I catch, posting, and I touch toes to mat. I come around the corner and pin. From this position, my hand threads through underneath and locks my training partner's hip. Now I reposition my head from his right hip across to the left. From this position, look how I come down and pin. Now I just take my second leg and pommel it across. So now everything's inside his ankles. Even as he goes to fight me off, my second hand punches in. Now as he tries to shrimp and move, look how I use my head on his far hip. So he can't bring the knees up. If my head's not there, the knees can come up, and you can put me back in guard. Okay? So you use your head as a post on his hips. Once again, we've got a talented opponent in front of us, and we're trying to play in this position. As we see, we're not making much headway. We go straight on through and hit that misdirectional. Now from this position, I touch my training partner's toes to the mat. I take my knee and wedge my training partner's hamstring and knee just like so. My hand punches through and my head repositions. From a situation like this, it's pretty easy for us to replace one foot with the other. Now both my ankles are inside. From this position, I punch my second hand in and I use my head as a post. So when he tries to bring his knees to his chest, he can't get elbow-knee connection because of my head. If my head wasn't there, he could get elbow-knee connection and put me back in guard. Okay? So that's a very realistic way to go from the throw-by into our second favorite Toreando completion position, toes to mat. Now we'll be looking at throw-bys, and we've seen they're a simple but highly effective way of no-gi Toreando work. The essential or basic throw-by is highly effective anytime the legs get extended, but as we deal with better opponents, or perhaps opponents who are anticipating it because we've done it before on them, then we have to start modifying it and go from a throw-by into another form of Toreando series passes. We've seen hip and knee, for example. We've seen putting our opponent's toes to the mat. Now let's look at another excellent method. This is a leg drag method. Now, when you first come into the gym and you see people drilling leg drags, you see this kind of thing all the time. The guy's on two hips, and you see people drilling leg drags like this. They get a hold of one leg and pull it by. Then the guy just brings the other leg across and goes back to guard. And you end up in these situations where the leg drags is never going to work like this. Okay, if he's on two hips and you just pull a leg across, the second leg will always just come over and just put you back in guard, and you're done. Okay, so every time you see people working from two hips, you end up in these repetitive situations where nothing ever gets done. You never pass anyone's guard this way. Okay, understand that leg drags do work extremely well under certain conditions, but flat on the ground with two hips isn't one of them. So what are we going to do? We're going to start off with a simple throw-by. We go in and we play, and we have to throw by and step. So of course, what does he have to do? He has to bring the second leg over. Now he's on one hip. Do you see this? Here he's flat. When he turns over, he goes on one hip, so that when he catches, he can pull himself through. But for one period of time, he's on one hip. Just turn onto your hip. This is the position where leg drags can work. Okay, when you're in a situation like this, a leg drag on the top leg will make it very hard for your opponent's bottom leg to recover. When he's comfortable on two hips, If I drag one leg, the other leg just recovers. It's easy, okay? But if I put a guy on one hip and I drag him from here, the bottom leg can't recover. So what we do is we use this movement to create a situation where his leg comes over, and then I just step everything back, and with a 2-on-1, we drag him on by, and now we've got what we want on the other side. Okay, so this is a very nice version of a leg drag. It's got more momentum than the classic leg drags you see, where we simply place the leg out to the side and go into plank position. This time we're pulling the leg through. So we're in front of a training partner. We go underneath. That signals that we're about to hit a throw by. Okay, this is the throw by grip here. If my hands are on top, you can't throw by. Hard to throw by from here. But the second you go underneath someone's heels, it signals what we're wanting. So don't be too obvious about it. Don't come out and grab someone like this and, of course they're going to anticipate the move. Play with various grips, okay? And then when it's time to go, you throw by. Now he comes across on the second side. Look how my legs come back. And we just pull everything through. And as a result, we're past our training partner's legs and ready to go. One more time. Right here in front of a training partner. Now the grip's on. Don't make it obvious. You're playing on top, now you're underneath. Playing on top, now you're underneath. Playing on top, boom, and you throw by. From here, we go leg dragging. Our legs come back. Don't pull them onto your own legs. The legs come back. As the legs come back, follow through, and there's the waist exposure you're looking for. So this is a good example of using a throw by into a leg drag.